Welcome to No Question About That. This is the weekend show with me, Ed, and you, Wayne. How's it going?
Not bad, thank you. As you can see, in an empty office, all my books have disappeared.
Yeah, what's going on?
I'm moving, so the books were the last thing to go because they're my pride and joy. Obviously, it's my life's work is there, so they were the last thing to be packed away.
All
So
right. That last book was too successful. You're now moving to one of those giant houses where all the footballers live in Cheshire,
no,
right?
the opposite. I'm downsizing because of the massive underachievement. No, just time to move. Yeah, time to
All
move.
right.
Time to
All
move.
right. Well, I was going to say talking a massive underachievement, but United won today. So, generally speaking, that has been the story of the club for the last 10 years. But victory in Fulham, we continue our record of not having lost to Fulham at Craven Cottage since 2009.
Yep.
I mean, we create these records to break them, of course, so that's got to go at some point. But so
Yeah.
we're going to talk about that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the stadium because a little bit of news this week with, unclear support from the government. I'd like support, but unclear what it means exactly. And then Antony is finally gone. Real Betis announced him with a Twin Peaks themed video. So I guess it was a homage to David Lynch. I'm guessing it was a bit odd.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I play Steaua Bucharest on Thursday night. All right, we'll get to the football first. An extremely solid defensive display. I guess you could say that was a good part. No real big chances given up at all. Just the one shot on target for United, though. I mean, that's not counting Ahmad's goal at the end, which his toenail was further forward than the defender's armpit. So that is no longer acceptable, apparently. But what were your thoughts? Initial reaction? We're recording 10 minutes after the final whistle.
Yeah, it wasn't good. It reminded me that, Martinez, he did exactly the same on Thursday night against Rangers. Did nothing for the first half, and then he just decided to have a wallop on it from 30 yards, didn't he? And this one, kindly, someone decided to get in the way of it and loop it in. Lukic and Leno did quite well, but this time the luck went for us, and we had the luck at the other end with Collier clearing one off the line. I think what it's difficult for me because I look at it and I still don't see the progress. We sit here after an away game against Liverpool and Arsenal. I can talk about green shoots because you talk about big games and signs of progress there, and the attitude that we showed either in looking like we deserved to win at Anfield or playing with 10 men and being so resilient at the Emirates. But today was very much like Thursday. I don't see anything apart from, and I'm loath to dismiss it completely, that the defensive display was very resolute, and Fulham have caused us problems in the past. So you then say, yeah, okay, that's something to be happy about. But I can't help but think, sorry, this is going to rile some people, I think. It's a lot to me reminiscent of the early Van Gaal days where we sort of like, he put the safety pin on and he's like, all right, well, we're going to really just try and be miserly and try and get through these games. And obviously that system works for that in the away games. And I've commented on that before, even down to the fact of playing an unfancied youngster or two because he's more in tune with the system because he's being given a break. So don't want to be too critical, but I think Collier, because he's done quite well. And again, this is going to sound like I am being critical, but like McNair, Blackett, back in the Van Gaal days, it all reminds me of that. To be honest, I feel
Cameron Borthwick Jackson. Whatever happened to him?
Not so much him, but earlier on than that, obviously those names came in, like Fosu Mensah, they came in after the injury crisis, like Rashford and everyone. But McNair and Blackett we used very, very early on, and I think that was like, and he moved to the new system and he was playing three at the back. And to be fair, McNair did brilliantly considering he converted from an attacking midfielder to playing central defence for that run of games. So I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment. But I mean, you win late on and you want to be enthusiastic about it, but it was just so miserable to watch, and it just wasn't fun to watch either.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I sat there watching in a half-empty pub today. I met a friend to watch the game, and there was no one there, and zero atmosphere, and the football was really flat, and it's very hard to get enthusiastic about it. We're caught in this kind of loop, and Amorim, he needs results, right? So I can understand him going, okay, if you can not concede goals, you've got every chance of winning with enough attacking talent on the pitch. And that's perfectly sensible. Not that I'm saying he's necessarily gone to a particularly defensive system, but he's continued playing these two fullbacks in wide areas, and they really give us nothing in an attacking sense. And even went one step further and played Bruno Fernandes deeper, which in a sense you could go, oh, well, that's a more attacking option in central midfield than Collier or Menu. But it's actually a defensive move because you take away all that chance creation in further areas. In fact, our goal today came initially from Bruno's ball to Garnacho, which unlocked the Fulham defence, and we scored off the second phase of that one. And so I feel like that's he's trying to find a way of not conceding stupid goals, and it is fair, I think, to say that under Amorim we've made a lot of individual defensive mistakes that aren't really systemic. And you can't really put them at the door of his system, which is basically, I mean, you can call it a 3-4-3 if you want, but really it's a 5 and then a 2 sat in front of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then a 2 and then a 1 up front, and the 1 is quite isolated. But if that's what it takes to win a few games and make sure we're not completely hemorrhaging, because he's got a free hit, but the free hit only goes so far. He can't lose 60% of his games and retain the support of his squad and the fans and maybe even the management. Who knows? And so I kind of understand why he's like, yeah, I want to be careful. And United hardly gave up any good chances at all today. Hardly created any, but hardly gave up any. And away game, like, yeah, I suppose that's fair enough. It's just, you're right in saying it's hard to see the shoots of recovery from that or what the end state looks like.
Yeah,
and you hope he's not. Giving up on his principles, happened with Ten Hag, and I'm not sure he is, but he's gone to a more prosaic form of his principles.
I don't even think that. I just think that that's what he does. I actually think if you look in the home games, I think that he's coming round to the fact that he knows he can't play that system at home because of the fact that it just doesn't respond, and it's too cautious, and it grinds the gears of the crowd, and he's often looking to make the changes in order to get some kind of positive generation of momentum from the game. So I think he's actually slowly coming round to that at home. Because we've talked about this ad nauseum, really. This sort of 5-man defence in particularly in the away games, but in the away games I don't mind it so much because it works. And I think today, because Fulham are above us in the league, so we can't discount that for a start. And I think that the players treated it seriously in that respect, because I think when we played Wolves away, I don't think they treated it seriously, because like the point is, we go back to the point, and I know we're talking about bigger picture things rather than the events of the game itself, but we go back to the storm comment, and we've talked about whether or not the storm was necessary and everything like that. I do feel like maybe sometimes the players with the ego that sometimes you need, but sometimes they've played above the station, like thinking, like with Manchester United, we don't have to like when we played at Wolves, for example, is the perfect example of it. We were just flat. We're exactly the same as tonight, but the difference was we were sloppy defensively at Wolves, and today we weren't. Now you can look at that and you can say that that's a positive step forward. I just don't I can't see that. I think it's a good sign. Don't get me wrong; it's definitely a good sign. But it was under Van Gaal. It was a good sign that's thing, because you would say that that's the first thing that you want to build upon. However, the problem comes with the system then, because you look at the number of players that you've got that can play in attacking positions and what they are doing. We've been back and forth over Bruno, whereas I know that I don't give him the credit that he deserves. He's been brilliant, and you look at the numbers and everything like that. The assists and goals that he's created over the time that he's been at United is phenomenal, really. And like I said, I like the risk taking players. However, there were times tonight again, and like you said, ironically, the goal comes from Bruno stretching the play, and Garnacho again doing the good thing because he did everything right at that moment. It's just the timing of the pass was slightly off, which you can forgive, but at least through daring to do something different, United created the chance that won them the game. But it's so funny because those players try something, and they did it 2 or 3 times tonight, where he's so disjointed within the system that they're in that it seems like it's reckless abandon of possession, really, because it doesn't, like Bruno will try something which trying a 35, 40-yard pass behind a defender was really got no chance of getting there, primarily because of the position of the defender. But it takes me back to, and again, I know that I'm diverting away from the passage of the game, but I was struck by this idea that, I've been trying to articulate it, but it's very difficult to do that sometimes when there's something, when it's quite early on, it's embryonic, like this is with United at the moment. So when I was working with the twins, Fabio and Rafa, on their book, we were talking about a long chat with Fabio about the Champions League final in 2011 and how it went so wrong and everything like that. We talked about tiki-taka and it being a negative philosophy, really, because what it does, it relies on the wearing down of an opponent, and the point of that is that when that opponent has, let's say, 20% less of the ball than what they used to, they've got to think quickly, and they're generally more rash in possession. That's the benefit of doing something like that. So it's a negative, that it's got negative principles, but obviously if you've got the better players in there that can play that possession football, and they're really good at sort of retaining and regaining the ball, that you wear down opponents mentally to do that. And I think that sometimes you see that in this United setup. And I think principally because you've got players like Bruno and Garnacho who like to take the risks, and they don't have somewhere where it's a sticking up point. So like Højlund again struggled tonight. We don't have players who can, or even, and I don't want to bag on him for qualities he doesn't have, because I actually think Garnacho played all right again tonight. But and praise him as he's going out the door by the looks of it, just like I was with Antony. But praise being a very generous application of the way that was describing Antony's form of late. But Garnacho's not the quickest, so Bruno was playing those kind of balls in, to Højlund, who can't hold it up, and Garnacho, who can't break behind the defence. So sometimes and it's a strange thing for United because they don't have that many attacking options in order to take chances like that. So it leads to these kind of fractious performances where they're just not good to watch because there's nothing building. Xerxes, ironically, generally improves it because he glides between the players, and it looks like there's something building with relationships, but it never even goes anywhere. Then the best thing that we saw tonight, the most progressive thing, was in the disallowed goal, which was the goal that we scored, obviously, with Bruno and Garnacho. Having criticised them mildly there, a lot of praise because of the chances that they took, decided the game, and then obviously Ahmad and Kobe, who do tend to link up well anyway, for the disallowed goal. So.
Yeah,
but just then when you look at that, it's just not enough to say that this is progress. And that's where I come back to it. I don't want to be negative because we won late on and you should be buzzing after something like that. But we're not in that moment where because you need to be looking at progress, and there are a lot of concerns at the moment. And you look at it and say, yeah, all right, we'll buzz it. It's good to win, but it's not that same buzz because you're looking for progress and it's just not there.
Yeah, I mean. Maybe, the overall system will be helped, I think, by getting in an attacking left wing back, and then you actually have an option over
Yeah.
on the outside to create those overloads that this system is supposed to bring. So that's one thing. We are not going to spend our way out of trouble here because it looks like we might have to sell a very good young attacking player to bring in that maybe good young attacking fullback. Who knows? I mean, time will tell in the next 4 or 5 days whether that is exactly what plays out. The things that United did well today, I mean, very few of them were in an attacking area. Højlund is playing with lead boots on. If you're going to use him as a number 9, it's got to be and use him sending long balls his way, which we did a hell of a lot today. There's just no point firing it into him, into his chest and getting him to fight. He's just not that player. If you use it into the channels and he runs and opens up space, fine. But even then, he looks static, and I feel like his confidence must be really in the toilet at the moment. We're not creating chances for him. He's not creating chances for himself. He spent almost all of the game fighting with defenders again, and Onana banging the ball onto him. I don't get it. It's mad, right? So that's partly on coaching and partly on the player. But the things United did well were the defensive side of things. We didn't allow transitions. Fulham are a very good counter-pressing side, right? Hardly had any good transitions at all. And covered narrow areas very, very well. I mean, statistically, they had 9 shots, but it's 0.6 XG. They created hardly any. I mean, not that we created anything either, but barely a decent save for Onana to make. I'm guessing that a lot of that 0.6 XG was from that corner and the header.
Yeah.
That Toby Collier expertly cleared off the line. See, sometimes the old-fashioned ways, having a man on the line is worthwhile. That was the good stuff. The bad stuff, our ability to progress it into the final third without it coming from Onana banging it long is very, very limited at the moment. And it's a concern because basically you've got 3 defensive players in that midfield third, in Dalot, Mazraoui and Ugarte, who all have their qualities, but moving the ball from that midfield third into the attacking third is not. It's just not. And either of them for different reasons. And Bruno was supposed to be that counterbalance, I guess, today. And he actually played in one of his more conservative ways, Didn't create a lot of chances today. Kept the ball. I guess in instruction, So that's the bad stuff. And as a result, the combination is a 1-0 victory, 3 points. We move above Crystal Palace. 12th place doesn't win itself, and all of that. So that is good, but it's just very, very prosaic and had a little bit of a whiff of late stage Van Gaal about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so, early stage Van Gaal, all stage Van Gaal, really. I think that's the thing because we would equate Ten Hag to, we have done, one of the features of the post-Fergie era has been at what stage in the chain are we to the post-Busby era, right? There's been that desperation to kind of liken one manager to one of the Busby successors. Is this the O'Farrell? Is this McGuinness? Is Ollie more like McGuinness and all that sort of stuff? And there are, football's cyclical, so there are obviously valid comparisons there. But there is a lot of, I feel like Mourinho was a lot like Van Gaal. Well, no, it wasn't anywhere near as autocratic as that, but it was still not good to watch. But sometimes Ten Hag was a lot like Van Gaal, and we talk about the systemic issues there, and this feels like that. And now, I can, you talked earlier on about the sort of credit that the manager's got, and now there's not likely to be any lynching at this early stage. So I don't think it's quite that bad. Obviously, he's still trying to familiarize himself with the squad, and you look at I hate saying stuff like that because I think the players are so well known, right? The Manchester United players have been at the club for a very long time, that there's getting to know the players on a one-to-one basis, but some of them have got reputations that are strong enough that you don't need to know that much about them. We've seen them long enough. I think sometimes that some of the critical thing that we get is that because we've seen them so often, and then you start to see them used again, like Dalot and Maguire, like for all the positives and negatives that we've said of them, because there's been an opinion, general consensus is that there won't be a United team that wins the league. You kind of go, oh, not another chance given by another manager, and you don't. You know what I mean? That's a bit of a difficult thing, but they have. I mean, Dalot wasn't bad. It wasn't horrible tonight, and Maguire did his job. But I mean, the thing that you're looking at now is what's the manager learning from all of this? Because he plays a 5-man defence in away games and tries to be more bolder at home. Yeah, all right, but I think that's not it wouldn't take a genius to work that out, because we were talking about that on the pod a few weeks ago as well. You can say, all right, that kind of approach works. Some of the things, like, for example, I thought logical explanation was that of Antony opening up the play on the right hand side, so Ahmad would help. But obviously, that's not something that's shared by the club or the manager, at least, because he's like, no, we're not bothered about that. And you're limiting your options there. And if you let Garnacho go, then you're limiting your options on the left. And the different things that you've got, like the sort of defense seems like it's sort of settling down with Maguire, De Ligt, and Martinez, because there was a long run of Mazraoui playing that right centre back, and he doesn't seem to like that anymore. Although I feel like that's more necessary in the home games now. Because if you look, sometimes he does line up as a 4. Sometimes that defence at home, because
they'll push one of the fullbacks forward.
Dalot is usually the one who goes quite far up. So I just think, I look at it and think, what are we seeing? What the manager's learning, apart from an over-dependence, an over-reliance on Ahmad? If not, the game plan being, when all else fails, Martinez, you've got free reign to shoot from 30 yards. Because he's worked a couple of times. So
I guess so. I wouldn't rely on it as a strategy.
No, exactly.
for success. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I don't know what he's learning right now that he doesn't already know about some of the players. United, there was Paul Scholes did a keep sell on Instagram earlier this week, and he wanted to sell 9 players. I mean, United are not going to do that. And he was on the fence about Garnacho. So that's not going to happen, right? This is not Football Manager. This is not Fantasy League or FIFA Ultimate Team or any of this kind of stuff. And United are also in a position where they will not be able to offer Champions League football next season, or potentially any European football, unless we somehow manage to win the Europa League. And that they are going to have to be much more sensible in terms of how they manage the squad and the wages. And they're going to obviously, they will be trying to remove Casemiro and Rashford, 2 of United's top earners, from the wage bill, and maybe some others too, and restructure things under this new manager who they are backing, I assume. I say assume because Jim seems like, quite happy to fire people at will.
I just
fired Ashworth, fired Ben Ainsley from his America's Cup team, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just going to look very different, I think, in terms of how they're thinking about profitability, how they're thinking about squad management, and maybe we're going through a period where we evolve. It's just, does that fit with what Amorim wants to deliver, right? A bunch of younger players. And how is he going to transform this team, this squad, into a team that can actually regularly score goals?
Yeah. Well, and especially when you're playing so many defensive players. Now, away from home, again, it's not such a bad thing if you've got economy and you can be clinical with that. And United have been. They're not generally, I've said this before, we're not generally, we're generally quite profligate. We create a lot of chances and waste a lot of chances. That's not been the case, unfortunately, of late. We create much less, but seem to be doing much better in the away games, at least. So again, you want to say, yeah, that's a thing to build upon, but it's just, I feel like we've talked to, there's a couple of things we talk about. It's like the sort of where everything balances itself out with the numbers, because the numbers will eventually settle down into some kind of mean, which way, United are not where they are in the league by accident. And then, I always talk about momentum as well. Like you have a run of draws. It's like, say we draw 5 games in a row. There could be 5 good draws, or there could be 5 terrible draws. You never know, like, until like the sort of like end of that and what comes afterwards. So, not wanting to sound like Sean Dash, cliches all over the place, but momentum can change a lot, and United's attacking momentum at the moment doesn't seem like it. There are things there that you say, like, if you would see the improvements, like I do see the improvement in Garnacho in some of his decision making soon enough. Maybe Chelsea will be benefiting from that. And United will have to sort of suck that one up while they've got Dogu or bringing in Fernandez against playing the left back. All of these kind of things. You think the transition at the club, would that be happening anyway? Like there's, what I'm talking about here. Like there's a playing structure, and you say, all right, we can invest all our hope and faith and belief again in a new manager and a new direction. It doesn't matter who the player is, because although this isn't an unlikable squad like it might have felt like it was 3 years ago, there's not that kind of attachment to many of them that you would say, we definitely believe that this player would be there for a league-winning season. But then you look at the structure of it, because that's one thing in the direction of the manager, but the other thing is, like, no matter who the manager is, you get the feeling that at this stage in the window, we'd be trying to get Rashford and Casemiro off the wage bill because of the financial situation that the club's in. And that's a different conversation then. Now, we can talk about their values as I happen to agree that they're probably, they are worth more as assets at the moment anyway. But what I'm saying is, if that was going to happen anyway, that's nothing to do with the manager, really. It's just a coincidence. And that's where I think, like, you said, you won't lose 8 or 9 players. Well, it doesn't necessarily matter if 6 to 9 players aren't playing. If they're just part of the peripheral squad and they're not there anyway, it matters who comes in to replace those players.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the point about doing 9 deals, is you have to bring 9 more in, unless you promote from the youth ranks. And like, United have not successfully done 9 deals in any window since Fergie left, or maybe even during Fergie's time. Right? It just doesn't happen. It's just too many. For the club to execute on. And especially execute on successfully. So that's it's going to be evolution. But I think the thing with some of I think there's financial thinking coming into a lot of this, right? So Amorim may get to say yes or no on any incomings or outgoings, and rightly so. And I don't think Garnacho would be sold from under him without his say so. But it'll be in the context of, you want to bring players in, we're going to have to sell first. All right. And so they may be trying to find a home for Casemiro. They won't get a fee for him because of his wages. So there's actually an impairment charge on the books that will go on there. So it actually costs United money to get rid of him.
Yeah.
At least in accounting terms. And then Rashford, obviously, the mega package that he signed a couple of years ago, at the height of his form, is proving a barrier to finding a permanent home for him. He may well find a loan in the next week or so, depending on whether Barcelona can ship out some players or Dortmund can find the money to cover some percentage of his wages, or whatever it looks like, right? So I don't think Amorim would be thinking about that were it not for the financial pressure that we're under as a club. And we're under that financial pressure because, one, we're not getting Champions League money. And definitely not later stage Champions League money. And 2, we've blown a hell of a lot of money on players who haven't performed, and one of them's gone out this week. And that's why we're thinking like this. There's no way, if United were on a Champions League budget, that he would be countenancing getting rid of. Certainly Garnacho, probably Rashford. He'd give it more time to try and get him working in this system. A good young coach should go, hey, you scored 30 goals a couple of years ago. Can we work out what's gone wrong since then and make that happen again? Right? I think any coach on the planet would want to try that first. and so the financial pressures on the club are really telling.
So
with Antony, he's gone, and that will save United about $1.5 million, like for the next 5 months.
exactly.
I guess it's marginal gains. Yeah, go on.
This is where I'm coming at with this. Like, is that £1.5 million
Worth it?
Because now you've got to run Ahmad into the ground. Like the same on the other side. Let's say you're going to lose Garnacho. The point is to bring in, let's say, Dogu, right? There's no talk. I mean, the whispers about Cunha. That'd be a dream scenario, but I don't think that would happen at this point, especially with Wolves in the position that they're in. So you are basically saying, all right, Rashford, Casemiro, Garnacho, all out, and Garnacho in particular moving out on Antony, who's already gone. No one else in apart from Dogu, and so Dallo will be out of the side. Is it worth that? Is all that worth the movement of getting Dallo out of the side? Because I know that Dallo's a liability at times, but he's also played well at times. And is it an emergency on that side for the balance of the team? Probably, yes. Do we have left-sided players? Yeah, they're all knackered and they can't play. So yeah, I understand the need to get him in. But then you don't have Garnacho on the left-hand side. So what happens there? Does Bruno go and play there and like, all right, he's done all right there, but he's not a naturally wide player, and sometimes he does lose his way in games because of that. Does he play from the right and you've put Ahmad on the left? It doesn't really work like that because Ahmad's performances there. So Bruno's position will be fixed on the left, albeit more inside, more insular if Dogu hits the ground running. You've got to win the gamble on him actually having done that, because I mean he's playing for a struggling team in Italy who, you know, he looks all right sometimes, but he looks a liability himself other times as well.
He's a 20-year-old attacking left back. I think with that comes a lot of risks. I mean, of course, right? Of course. This is the point I keep making about United will need to, because the financial situation developed through either progressing our own high potential young players or bringing in high potential young players, partly because the package that you'll pay will be less than for an established star, both in fee and wages, right? And so that makes a lot of sense to me. What makes much less sense is trading one for the other. And because there's a far high, whatever you think of Garnacho, like if you think his ceiling is as high as it gets or a bit lower than that, and the people rationalize whatever their priors are when they think about this, of course, you know. So, and I let's say never believe anything on the internet, because some of the same people who are like, bin Rashford off 6 months ago were, you know, jizzing in their pants about the prospect of signing Sander Berge, star of the Fulham team. And I'm like, whatever, right? But your strategy here, or United's strategy, is not going to be trading off one high potential young player for another, because the risks associated with trying to adapt Garnacho to whatever Ruben Amorim's system is are much lower than bringing a young player who may or may not make it in the Premier League, right? We all hope he does. I hope he's brilliant. I hope he's the best. I hope he's the reincarnation of Roberto Carlos, right? And he's the world's finest left wing back, and maybe that'll be the case, right? You know, apparently a lot of, well, so Lecce say a lot of top clubs are after him.
But you still, even if he is, you are still left with the problem.
We're still left with the imbalance. Yeah.
And like you said, like it or not, he's still Garnacho. Those little signs of improvement were evident in creating the winning goal tonight. So, and if you don't have that, you don't have that attacking flair when there is little else attacking flair in there.
I think it's a major risk, and if Ruben Amorim is signing it off, I mean, as I said, I think the overall strategy is determined a lot by the financial picture. But if he's signing it off, on his head will be it, these kind of decisions. And that's why he's paid the big bucks. That's why he's given the responsibility. Unfortunately, every single manager we've had post-Fergie has made a lot of really, really bad decisions when it comes to recruitment. Like so many. I was writing my weekly newsletter at nqatpod.substack.com if you're very interested in hearing me pontificate about nonsense about football. But I was writing on about United's transfer strategy over the last 10 years, and I was just doing some calculations. I think it's about £3.2 billion we've spent on net transfers and wages since Fergie left. 3.2 billion for 2 FA Cups, 2 League Cups, and the Europa League. I don't know. Was that worth it? I don't know. And each time we've reset our expectations, haven't we? I mean, it was Van Gaal got sacked amongst other reasons for not making it to the Champions League when winning the FA Cup. Ten Hag managed to get a new contract and another £200 million in new signings for that performance. Worse, in fact. And so we've reset our expectations as a club while splurging money that we now don't have. 5 years of losses, and the club often trumpet, if you read all the 10Ks, the quarterly filings with the SEC, and you go on the investor calls and stuff like that, often trumpet how much EBITDA they're claiming they're about to make, but the actual underlying profit there is like non-existent. It's negative, right? We are losing money, and in fact, it was said this week. I can't remember who said it, but they're trying to readjust to profitability right now, and that's what all the job dismissals are: the price hikes, the cuts in minor things, the removing the ambassadorial role from Ferguson and David Gill, and it looks like Andy Cole and Dennis Irwin and Brian Robson, and whose last ambassadorial thing was to hike up Kilimanjaro for the foundation. Awful stuff they did there. And so it, like, all of this looks awful. And Sir Jim and Ineos are the punching bag for 20 years of failure, right? I'm not saying they're doing a good job either, but it's now coming. The chickens are coming home to roost. We are paying the piper, whatever idiom you want to use here, for catastrophic failure over the years. And that 3.2 billion has largely been wasted.
Yeah. So
and now a different strategy has to come to the fore.
It's the pinch. This is the pinch point where we are, and I think like anyone, I don't want to. Again, we're talking after a win, a late win at that. Traditional Manchester United. I'll enthuse about the various aspects of United's identity as I tend to do, and that's definitely one strand of it. But I think anyone who is not looking at this current situation and realizing that, first of all, the 2028 target of winning a league title seems very ambitious. Not that it shouldn't be, really, but because we're not a million miles away from Liverpool, really. When we talk about it in that financial sense, like we are doing, and like there are those of us who understand the implications of that, it feels like a light year away from where Liverpool are. And we're not in terms of playing style, and anything can happen. However, that is where we are at with the pinch point. So now you're looking at it and you're saying, all right, well, if the sale of Garnacho and the sale of Rashford gives us leverage under PSR, which again, people might have seen me tweeting about this week, but this is a nonsense of a rule. I hate it, and we talked about it and we joked about it in the summer about the sort of shifty transfers between Newcastle and Villa and Forest and Chelsea. And I was annoyed about it then, like how disgraceful it was that they basically on a whim move a young player who, who was open to being developed, but they basically forcing them to move and everything, and treating them like. Just treating them horribly, basically.
So that mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I hate that. That's one of the things. This rule will change. It will change because it's a horrible rule, and people are complaining about it already. It will change.
Well, the accounting methodology won't, and that's what it's based on, right? It's the reason why. I have. I was going to say arguments, friendly debates with people online all of the time about this. People just don't get it, right? I see the term pure profit like bandied around about young players sold, and it's a nonsense, right? You're not inventing money. all you're doing is booking the profit on an asset that's valued at £0 straight away, right? And which is fine because it's an asset valued at £0. Why wouldn't it go in your account straight away, right? You're not. There's no need to amortize the value, right? Now, how you calculate that in PSR terms, they could change. What they could say is that profit is booked over the same length of contract you would with any other sale, right? They could do that, right? And so you wouldn't be following traditional accounting practices. You would be following a tweak in the rules, and all the clubs could vote it in. They probably won't because I think everyone sees this as a loophole when you're in trouble, and there are enough clubs in financial trouble or like living right on the edge of their financial means. That it's unlikely that you get 14 clubs who will vote for this at the moment. That kind of change, right?
Yeah. Sorry. In the short term, I know you were going to make a wider point. I'll just summarize what I was going to say with this, because where you are is kind of where I want to leap off from, just to make the point to return to sort of modern day United and the situation that they're in. So I do believe the rule will change. I think because just the way that every rule changes, they have 5-year lifespan, and then they see the implications with it, and it doesn't work, and it's horrible. And there'll be sort of outrages from young players who probably come out and start speaking about it. My career's been ruined by this regulation, or blah blah blah, and they'll have a fair point. But for United, obviously we're talking let's say Rashford, let's say Garnacho, and it implicates our ability to spend exponentially over whatever the value is that they're sold. So let's say that United have more wiggle room to spend in the summer, but they're still kicking that can further down the road because they already owe so much. But it gives enough leverage for Amorim to bring in 3 or 4 players, 3 or 4 attacking players, who all have to hit the ground running because United can't afford to take any more chances. And like you've talked before, the hit rate on that's got to be 100% now if 100%. They want to be. So this is what I mean. So they've got to be able to do this, and those players, because United have a dearth of attacking options now, especially if they're getting rid of them as well, that they have to do it. There's too much pressure on it, and this is why I look at it and I think you better saddle up, lads, because it's going to be difficult 2 or 3 years. Because if that's a hit rate that you're expecting, I think it's going to be difficult to watch for the next year. I don't like predicting that because I go to the games every couple of weeks. It's at least on the away games you've got the atmosphere there, and United are set up better to win those kind of games. But they won't be if they lose a Garnacho or another attacking player. Do you know what I mean? All those kind of things. The good thing is that Ahmad and Bruno don't fall into that category, so they're miles better off keeping them. So I just think from the aspect of will it get better than this, I can't see how it does for the next year to 18 months to watch, at least.
It's well down the road. I mean, I guess we see whether there's some very creative deal making over the next 2 windows and that accelerates the progress. But I think it's likely to be quite challenging for a while. Money is not invented here, right? Whatever United spend has to be matched with revenue, whether that's incoming revenue, all the selling of an academy product does is pull that revenue forward. You still got to match it with revenue in years 2 and 3.
Yeah,
there's no magic money tree. So Jim, if he was wont to do, which I'm not sure he is, given the nature of who the man is. If he owned the club fully and there were no PSR rules and he could just chuck money at it, that would be great. But that is not how it is. United have to generate revenue in order to spend it. There's nothing more he can do. He's capped out on his owner contribution. Right? He's put $300 million in this first year, £250 million or so. That is mostly earmarked for infrastructure projects. Actually, what it's done is just float our cash reserves. Otherwise, that line of credit would be even bigger. Right? So, I don't know. From a financial point of view, it's really difficult. From a squad management point of view, it's really difficult. On the pitch, it's really difficult. Ruben Amorim, he's very dark-haired at the moment. Give him a year and he'll be grey. He'll be falling out. He'll be shopping for Just for Men. There'll be splash on the back page of the Star. He went to the local Asda to get a Just for Men because he's so much under pressure. I don't know. It's a really challenging time coming ahead. All right. I think that's a good segue because we barely talked about the football because it was so underwhelming despite winning. We won. Woo! Antony is gone. It's alone. Real Betis paying tribute to David Lynch in their announcement video. It's kind of weird and creative, like the rabbit and all of that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do with Antony, clearly, but yeah. Frankly, some damn fine cherry pie would be more useful than Antony in this squad. No, I'm being cruel. It'll save United $1.5 million in wages. We still pay the PSR fee, so we are actually subsidising Betis's squad here. I know it's not presented by that, but it's our asset which we are no longer using, and Betis are for essentially free, or a very very small wage contribution. So is that. Maybe Patrick Dorgu happens in the next 4 days. Maybe something happens with Rashford. Maybe something happens with Garnacho. We'll watch that closely before the window slams shut. And then the other thing we were going to talk about is the stadium. Those that be have made it be known that the Chancellor is supportive. This Rachel Reeves, Labour Chancellor, supportive of the Old Trafford regeneration project. It was very kind of, I don't know what you made of it because there was no detail in it. What part of it is she supportive of? I can tell you for absolute certain, I've said this before, despite some very bad faith people in the media or pseudo media repeating it, there will not be some mega tax break that United as a club get in order to pay for a new stadium. That's not how it's going to work. I don't employ enough people for that to be on the government agenda.
No. Yeah. I think there are a lot of people who misinterpreting that story last night from Mike Keegan. Obviously, Omar Barada's come out and he's had a statement as well. I'll be honest. We've talked about maybe 3 or 4 occasions. It's almost like mental health checking. I think perhaps you've been worried about my attachment to tradition. You'd be like, Wayne, how are you feeling about the stadium this week? But you've revisited it a couple of times with me. It's the first time I'm going to revisit it and say that I'm having a wobble on the opinion, and not really for anything that's related to the history of it. But I think, given everything that we've already talked about today on the pod, with the player transactions and everything like that, and how difficult it is to see positive wiggle room, barring a miracle. I mean, the Europa League is winnable, is there. I mean, the other teams in the competition are poor, just we are as well. So, but if we got into the Champions League via the back door and we're able to sort of fast forward some of those plans, even if it did mean taking the hit with Garnacho and Rashford, and let's say that it turns around, and the best case scenario that we are competing comfortably to get in the Champions League next season via the league, let's say comfortable third, would be significant progress from now. It's still a lot of turnaround in that moment in time, and you've got to be optimistic to see that. I feel that the idea of, the bigger picture of wanting a stadium, but there are a lot of people saying Old Trafford's not fit for purpose. It is fit for purpose. It holds 76,000 supporters 73 every couple of weeks. Yeah, all right, it needs to be modernised and everything like that. And I get, theoretically speaking, the idea of building a new stadium, all that sort of stuff, it all makes sense. And I'm even on board with the historical aspects of it, as I've talked about before. There's something about it that doesn't sit right when the supporters are already paying the consequence of, they've been told that they're paying the consequence of the debt that's on the club that's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So there's that element of it. And the team's got to be competitive. Do we want to be spending... Do we want a scenario where local fans are priced out of going to watch a crap team play in a brand new stadium? A team that's bottom of the... Like where we are now, let's say bottom half of the Premier League. No real, you've got hopes of a cup run, and that cup run will be the ambition to which you attach all future ambitions, as unrealistic as they are, because we're sacking managers all over the place because we can't get the direction right. But we're doing it in a shiny stadium that is being paid for by, not by the government, but by the supporters who are now paying $2,000 for the cheapest season ticket. And yeah, all right, season tickets will go up anyway. But like in the stand where we are, they're £1,000 each. They'll be a little bit more than £1,000. I just think I think that it's all very well talking about a stadium, but there are very real problems that where you're talking about. You just said it there. Like, we're having to. Brian Robson climbed Kilimanjaro last year, and 2 months
and he's got no knees.
And 2 months later, and he's a cancer survivor. And two months later, we are cutting Brian Robson. And really, these ambassador roles are kind of like a historical payback for lower wages of, especially Robson, because they've gone exponentially higher. Like, maybe not so like Andy Cole and Dennis Irwin and players like that, who are probably much more comfortably off than Robson. But still, Cole, in comparison to Rasmus Højlund, probably. So he's kind of it's what all football clubs do, and they're right to do it. So for all these things to be happening in the name of cost cutting in the short term, because of the implication of a debt that's leveraged on the club, it's got nothing to do with the supporters, and then there's this long term kicking the ball can down the road, and basically saying there's a long term expectation that the supporters are going to have to pay for that as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to stomach at the moment. I know. So it's nothing to do with the plans, the regeneration. Sounds good, all that sort of stuff. It's nothing to do with the history of it, because I can even, I've said before, I've given reasons for why I can get on board with that. I just feel like right now, when we are selling pieces of our identity in Rashford and Garnacho in order to bring in, in order to be able to afford a left back from Lecce, it doesn't fit right with me.
Well, let me give the I was going to say counterpoint, but it's kind of the positive scenario of a regeneration project, right? So it looks like they had two ideas on the table. One was to increase the capacity of Old Trafford and renew it in some fashion, much like Barcelona and Real Madrid did. Real Madrid have boosted their revenue by €200 million a year from the new stadium, and it's fantastic. Barcelona took out a huge loan in order to renew their stadium, and it will be amazing when it's done. It's not going to look like Camp Nou, mind you, but and I'm sure there's some traditionalists will not be happy with that. Real Madrid got lucky in one sense, in that they could do a lot of the regeneration during COVID lockdown. In fact, accelerated that build while they played at the Academy Stadium, because there were no fans there anyway, right? Super lucky, incredibly lucky. Barcelona have had to go play at Montjuic on top of a hill in an athletic stadium for 2 years. Fans hate it. Fans don't turn up there. It's costing them hundreds and hundreds of millions of euros to do that. And so you got these two scenarios on the table at United. One is renew Old Trafford, probably on a phased approach, one stand every couple of years. It's going to take a decade or so to complete the renewal, and we get 13,000, 14,000 extra seats in a much nicer stadium, which our lead architects, for their own self-serving reasons, say won't be fit for purpose anyway. I don't know whether I believe that or not, but you get something, let's say, is akin to renewed Camp Nou or renewed Bernabeu, right? Something nice in its current footprint. It's more limited in terms of what you can do, and it's you really spend loads of money on the commercial side of things, and so on and so on and so on. And then the second option, brand new stadium on land that United already own, but have to move the freight terminal, which was part of the government sponsor. They want government to pay for the removal of the freight terminal or its relocation to Liverpool, which has some historical irony, as we were talking about before we came on, in terms of the rivalry between the two cities. And also build a brand new stadium. You can do two other things. Like, one is long-term financing, right, on a brand new asset, which you can leverage against the asset. Would be paid for by the club, yes, but presuming that you generate a few £100 million more a season, because it's a mega stadium and all of that would effectively pay for itself. It wouldn't be an Arsenal at the Emirates, who really have not generated. They destroyed one of the most beautiful stadiums in English football for that absolute soulless shithole, which hasn't really done much for them. It's a crime, and I'm not an Arsenal fan of any sorts, So, you'd hope it's not that, but you can see in that scenario, that second scenario, building a new stadium, separate financing, brand new asset, and you can get sponsored in some fashion. Old Trafford at Ineos Park coming up, Qualcomm Stadium in the Old Trafford Dome, like something like that, right? You can see a longer term benefit to the club, with caveat all the downsides of moving away from its traditional home, and less disruption in the short term, and a way of financing it and generating even more money if that's what it's all about. So, and on the ticket prices, every new stadium that's been built has been paid for by fans effectively. The Tottenham Stadium is not cheap. The Emirates is more expensive than Highbury used to be. No doubt. They have this split ticketing process in Barcelona and Real Madrid, where socios pay less than tourists. Which I don't know whether anyone would argue with that model at United or not. They've been moving towards it. If you have a 100,000 stadium with brand new revenues and you skew it towards more corporate stuff, more premium seating, and there are still reasonable tickets, then I guess people get on board. If everyone pays, and Sir Jim gets his wet dream of £66 tickets all round, moving away from the historical home and paying for this shiny dome, and traditional legacy fans are priced out, it's no good for anyone, is it? And and it looks like the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where every time there's a corner, 50,000 phones go up to take pictures.
Well,
they do it at Old Trafford already, yeah.
Well, no, your team's got to be good enough to win a corner, and there's no telling that, all right, I'm being facetious there, but there's the other element of that is, first of all, the team performing well, because loyalty is not something you can take for granted. United have had, I know that there's a thing there. We were all very proud of it as fans. They sell out almost every week, and even when they were in second division, they were the highest supported team in the country. But there have been dips in the past, the late 80s. There have been times in the past where those attendances have dipped, so there's no taking that for granted. You can very, very easily see a backlash in the next 6 to 18 months from supporters, especially if there are things like, the gamble, which is, they're all gambles at the moment, and there's no definite sort of, this is going to work. But gambling with things that are the club's identity, like a player who scored in the FA Cup final 6 months ago, you're now saying he's a tradable asset in order to generate short-term income. That you were trading off a piece of history for that. I know people might listen to this and say that's a massive overreaction for an inconsistent player. Yeah, but it's the symbolism that it represents in terms of taking that gamble. You were basically saying we're trading off that. Now, everything that you're saying, I'm completely on board with, but the scenario is a team playing well and competing for trophies in that time, right? Because if they're not, and they've taken all these short-term things and we're talking all across the board, like staff changes, the ambassador changes, the trading on the club's identity in order to generate short-term, to get out of short-term loopholes and everything like that. All these kind of things. Look, there might be some bigger picture there, what is activated by Ratcliffe getting full ownership of the club, where he can relinquish
he can do more, yeah.
Exactly, where he's more liable to clear the debt, because there's no point for him doing it right now. So there are bigger picture things to consider that we just don't know yet, and it might well turn out to be like that. So these might be short-term measures they're not necessary. We've got to feel the pinch for the next 6 to 18 months. But I think the thing is, when it's not just the next 6 to 18 months, it's the last 10 years of it. And now there's been so much campaigning against the current ownership, which is still the current ownership, so much protesting, that we were sold on this as being hope for the future. And for it to be like, kind of like, no, you're going to pay the price of the debt in the short term, is very much like a sick punch to the gut.
Yeah.
And I think just to finish the point on what you're saying, the long-term point is all that sounds well and good. There's just a lot of gambles to get there, and it does depend on the team playing well at the end of it.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's the goal of all this, right? Shiny new stadium with a shit team in front of a half full crowd because it's too expensive for anyone to go it's not the goal. I mean, there's an analogy with the country overall, right? Difficult economic situation for more than a decade now. Unpopular government kicked out. New government comes in and they're unpopular too, and making some very difficult decisions. I'm sure Ratcliffe would not like that analogy because he's the Tory. But yes, there's some very difficult times ahead. Of course, like a gold medal scenario here, which I'm not saying is likely, is Ratcliffe gaining full ownership, which may or may not happen. I mean, certainly the sales document indicates that it's a very strong possibility, but it still takes the Glazers deciding to sell full control. And they, again, for people on the internet who want to argue with me about it, come at me. I've got all the receipts here. They decided not to sell a controlling stake of United, right? They didn't want to. At no point was that on the table with anyone. And if you're listening, Brent, which you're not, but you get it wrong all of the fucking time, and then your minions repeat it. But a gold medal scenario is they do sell, Ratcliffe gains full ownership, and somehow either refinances or pays off all the debt, right? So the senior secured notes, which are up for renewal in 2027, will have to be refinanced whatever way, right? That is not the most expensive part of United's debt. That's about £20 million in interest a year. It's £20 million we could spend on players, but it's £20 million. The actual most expensive stuff is the revolving credit facility, which costs a horrendous amount of money in interest every year. Spend about 40 million on that revolving credit facility, and it was all spent on crap players, like just almost universally. And that is a consequence of the first strategy, which was to leverage to buy the club and the Glazers' ownership. So gold medal scenario, Ratcliffe gains control. Whatever you think of him, I think he's a git, but maybe you love him. Who cares? Right? Pays off the debt. Somehow works out a financing scenario for regeneration of Old Trafford in whatever of those two scenarios you prefer. And it doesn't all fall on the fans. And as a legacy project, which this is for him, he decides to cash in some of his Ineos shares and dump it into Manchester United for the good of the community. I don't expect it to happen, but it could happen. All right, we've rambled on. We'll get to Steaua Bucharest later in the week. United play Steaua Bucharest on Thursday. I'll do a preview at some point with one of the crew. Wayne, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time, Ed. It's
always a pleasure. If you haven't caught it yet, The Lost Tapes, episode 1, Eric Cantona is out.
Catch it.
Catch it, yes. Go hit the subscribe button in whatever app of your choice you prefer for podcasts, and it will be there. We very much appreciate your support. Bye now.